Hey, hello. Today I am here with Norman Blair, author of Brightening Your Inner Skies. This is one of my absolute favorite books on Yin Yoga. Thank you for writing this book, Norman. I always say I go between this book and Sarah Power's book, Insight Yoga. So, I always love when people mention me alongside somebody else that I admire a lot. And so, um, I hope you do too, but it's like, wow, really? Somebody considers me beside them? That's amazing. But yeah, what I love about the way Norman talks about yin for me is that, um, a lot of times yoga teachers can really focus on anatomy. And I'm not saying that Bernie doesn't, that Norman doesn't have, but Bernie's another teacher, yin teacher, but that Norman doesn't have a great grasp on anatomy, but that you really dive into the mindfulness aspect of it, the connection between life on the mat, off the mat, the psycho-emotional aspect of yin yoga. And that is just what really lights me up about yin and keeps me practicing yin. And so that's what really draws me in. And also I feel that you really embody the qualities of yin, at least in your writing. And so I'm assuming off the mat as well too. So yeah, this is a book that um, I find that yeah, it just so embodies the qualities of yin. Like it doesn't love to be, for me, it doesn't love to be read in a linear way. It likes to be dropped into and meandered around. And yeah, so I love this book, and it's such an honor to talk to you today. So thank you so much for being here, Norman, and for taking this time with me today.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, it's a great honor for you to mention that book in the same breath as Sarah Power's book. And Sarah has been a huge, huge influence on me and continues to be an influence on me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's had such a huge influence on the field of yin yoga. And I think, gosh, that book just, her book too, it just like yours, it just came through from some other plane. Because honestly, every time I go back to Sarah's book, it's like, I think I've read it so many times and I pulled it out so many times, but I don't think I read that before. It's there's always some new gem there.
Different, it's layers and layers, isn't it? But I remember
Hmm.
the first training I did with Sarah, it was Sarah and Paul teaching together. And Bernie was on it as well as a participant. And when was it? 2004. And then I did subsequent trainings with Sarah, and it was great. There was only like, the ones she did in the UK, there was maybe like 15, 20 people on it, which is
Wow.
fantastic. That real kind of atmosphere of intimacy and being able to
Mm.
have close contact with a teacher as experienced and as skillful as Sarah.
Yeah, amazing. Do you think that's probably part of a quality of yin to that intimacy?
Um, it's something I'm really into, and I kind of sometimes will talk about industrial yoga, which is like the large workshops, and I do teach large workshops.
Hmm.
But when you're teaching in that kind of level, sometimes things can get lost. That kind of the relationship between the teacher and the student, the people coming
Hmm.
along. And the trainings that myself and my partner run, we keep them small. We keep it like a small group. And so then there's more contact. Yeah, there's more sense of like, working together as a small group. And I feel that people are able to be maybe more honest about themselves when they're in a smaller
Hmm.
group, because when we're in a larger group, inevitably the kind of the defenses come up because we're not so trusting of the other people around us. So I do see on the trainings of attempting to create a container where people feel able to express themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I find that when I'm teaching on YouTube, which I teach to a really large audience on YouTube, that, I teach the principles of yin and I teach yin yoga there, but then in my community, when I teach yin yoga workshops, I'm teaching smaller groups, like 12 to 24 would be the biggest, so much smaller groups. And then we do go much deeper. We go deeper into the layers. And then also there's that space within it. Like yesterday, we even did a yin and generative writing. So there was space within the class to stop and give the mind time to process what's happening. But then afterwards, we have the space and time to speak as a group and to talk to the teacher about what's happened. And that's just not possible in the YouTube comments, right? It's just, I mean, you can, but I personally I wouldn't bare my soul in the YouTube comments. That's not for me. I'm way too guarded for that kind of stuff. So yeah, I agree. I think that, the smaller classes and the smaller settings are really necessary for that sense of safety that does allow you to go into those deeper layers that Yin really does invite you into.
And I think one of the points of when you're having a smaller group is not so much placing of the teacher up on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole kind of putting the teacher, so there's increased distance between the people participating and the teacher. And one of my aspirations is to kind of, I sometimes talk about egalitarian yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So a kind of a practical example of egalitarian yoga is that there's an equality of options. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, doing handstand is better than doing child's pose.
Right.
All the options within the poses, they're equal. But also kind of egalitarian yoga, rather than having the teacher being put up on this pedestal, what some people
Mm-hmm.
might know as like the guru model, and then the teacher's up on the pedestal and we can't question the teacher, or
Mm-hmm.
if we do question the teacher is hostile or just pushes the questioning away. I think it's really important to have that sense of like openness within the relationship of teacher student.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I feel so grateful that I trained with Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. And so with that style, it was always, that comes from the origins of that comes from Carl Rogers, where the individual has and their experience is held with the highest regard. So from the beginning of my teaching, that was ingrained in it. And so that's always been with me. And then I think that also more recently, I just am so grateful for the trauma informed yoga, which brings forward choice so much more. And yeah, I'm really grateful to see what that's brought to us. And also the other thing that I learned a lot from my training in Buddhism is the mindfulness. Any teachings that come forward, I think that guru model can be very present in mindfulness, but I always in Buddhism, in Buddhist circles, but I always appreciated when there was that reminder that anything that I'm saying, you need to take and test out in your own life. And I often say that to my students. So I'm grateful to have had those threads woven through my practice. I do find it interesting though, and I'm curious about this. This is a bit of an edge for me right now as a teacher, is that as the pendulum swings so far to egalitarianism in the yoga classroom, how you find holding that container, because I'm finding there is actually an edge as a teacher right now to holding the container, where if everybody is equal, who's actually holding the space? Do you know what I mean?
That's such a great question. Yes,
Yeah.
because boundary, the container needs
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. So
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, I remember on that training that I did with Sarah, and a part of it was we taught maybe 15 minutes. And Sarah said after I taught, and it was interesting because I did this quite unconsciously. And she said that when you taught, you stood up in front of the group of people and then you walked around the outside of the group. And I did it, I had no kind of conscious thought, this is what I was going to do. It's just what I did do. And she said it was almost like a dog marking their territory. So
Mm-hmm.
marking the boundaries. So
Mm-hmm.
clearly the egalitarian can become too floppy and too loose.
Total. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is that point of like someone has a lot of experience So someone has a lot of experience around anatomy. So, oh, so it's hurting your knee. So, well, let's have a discussion about this. As you know, one of the things I do, I run mentoring groups, and you know, I see my role in the mentoring as a facilitator. So there'll be people. So the groups again are small groups. 5 teachers come along, and some of them know far more about many things than I do. But
Hmm.
it's kind of facilitating that space, and
Yes.
also ensuring that people have a chance to speak. So yeah, I'm very much into boundaries, and I'm very much, if I'm teaching a class, just as a simple example, if I'm teaching a class and someone goes completely off message, so I'm teaching,
Right.
actually this happened to a friend of mine maybe a year or two ago. She was teaching a yin class, and someone started doing vinyasas in the middle of the class.
Yeah. Right.
And she was like, well, and I was like, I would have gone over, and said, listen, there are plenty of other spaces that you can do vinyasas, but this is not that space.
Hmm.
If it's a one-to-one, it's different, but it's a group class and people see someone else going substantially off message. So then there's a losing of the boundaries.
Yes.
So yeah, I have in the past, I have asked people to leave classes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not very often, Melissa, but you know,
Yeah.
there was, you know, I remember once when I was teaching an intermediate Ashtanga class, and it was a busy class, and as soon as the class started, I could see someone was not familiar with the Ashtanga practice.
Hmm.
And it's very clear this is for people who know Ashtanga yoga, and it's not safe because the class I'm teaching
Yeah.
the class at such a pace, it's not safe. I have not got um, the ability to kind of manage that person because I've got to look after the other people
Yeah.
that come along. So yeah, I think as teachers, we need to, as well as preaching egalitarianism, we need
Hmm.
to stand in our power.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad to hear you say that because, um, you sent me along so generously a huge care package in preparation for this interview, and one of them was the Yoga Teacher Mentor book, and I just have to say, like, there's a lot of messaging to teachers that we need to accept everything that happens in the classroom, like that, and yeah, and while that is yes, often, and I hear over and over again that we need to do the work and we need to do the work on ourselves. And hey, look, I've been teaching for 20 years and I've been in therapy for pretty much 20 years, all those 20 years, and doing my own inner work. And like you say, there are those times where there are those exceptions, very few and far between, but where we do need to like draw the line and hold the space for the benefit of the whole, for the benefit of the group. And yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that because yeah, I think this is why there's also, I'm just seeing and hearing a lot about boundaries also in our culture right now too.
So I was just going to say, with that book, The Yoga Teacher Mentor, Jess Glennie actually trained in Phoenix Rising.
Did you really?
Did. When you said Phoenix Rising, I'm familiar. I know a little bit about it. But I would I I don't want to say should because I don't believe in shouldism, but I think every yoga teacher could benefit from reading that book. And personally, I think every yoga teacher, could benefit from seeing a psychotherapist. And
Hmm.
I find it remarkable that there's not a system of supervision and feedback. So feedback, in my mind, is this precious gem. And yet, how often do we get feedback as a yoga teacher? So my partner is involved in a Buddhist community, and when they teach meditation, so they're in a team and they're teaching meditation. So there'll be the person leading the class, and there'll be someone else who's part of the team sitting in, and after the class, they'll give them feedback. I think this is
Yeah,
you
I
get
think
it.
it's brilliant. I think that would be amazing. And I think it needs to come from peers.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah,
all
not necessarily students, because
no,
students
not
have a different agenda.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I learned that actually. I learned that as a bitter lesson Melissa, in my early years of teaching, I remember asking a few people who were coming regularly along to classes for feedback, and then I was like, that was a mistake. So now I would never ask students for feedback. Exactly what you said. They've got an investment. Getting feedback from peers or getting feedback from a more experienced teacher. Just
Yeah.
say, could you come along to my class? Could you sit in, so observing the class, not participating, sit on the class and tell me what you think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think as teachers, we need mentoring. And I've been seeing a mentor who used to be my psychotherapist. So she kind of flowed from that role into being my supervisor. And I found it really helpful. I remember actually once I was involved in this situation and I asked her for advice. And I kind of saw it as a sword of truth, because what she said was essentially get rid of this person.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, my instinct was to include, because like many yoga teachers,
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of people pleasers.
Mm-hmm.
We want to
Mm-hmm.
include people. It's a challenge to exclude people.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, get rid of that person.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're doing is you're focusing on that person and you're ignoring the other people.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware of the group. And it was fantastic advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that really, that really speaks to me and my soul, my higher self, my inner self. Feels like, yeah, that would just be so nourishing to have that, especially as a more experienced teacher, I feel like there's so much available to people starting out. You can go, you can get your training, you can do all those things, but then once you've been teaching for a long time, um, there aren't those spaces in the same way.
And it's also when we've been teaching for a long time, finding that growing edge.
Mm-hmm.
The danger is one of the, I wrote about this recently, of like an essential skill for teaching yoga is the ability to say breathe without getting bored. So
Hmm.
how many times have you said the word breath, Melissa? Breathe,
Yeah.
breath, it's endless. So there's that skill of being able to say similar things without becoming complacent, without becoming disengaged. So we need to stay engaged.
Mm.
But yeah, there's a lot, with teaching yoga, we do these 200-hour trainings, and then we're like baby birds, we're booted out of the nest, and it's
Mm-hmm.
swim. And some people who might be really excellent teachers sink.
Mm-hmm.
I do think we all need support, and we all need advice, and sometimes we need those kind of prods of like push us into that place where we could be more growing, more
Mm-hmm.
challenged.
Yeah, let's maybe change gears a little bit then, because I have a few things that I'd love to talk to you about. And you're talking about a growing edge, and that was one thing that I loved in your book is that you do speak about your personal story. And there's a chapter in the book about your path among the trees, and you speak about some of your edges in that book, which I feel like I can relate so much to those edges. And you spoke at that time, and this book was published 4 years ago now.
2016.
5 years ago now. Oh yeah, I lost 2020. So yeah, you spoke about the harsh inner critic, which I can totally relate to. And then also I have a very strong wood element, so I can also relate to the irritation and frustration piece too. So I'm curious, because we're always growing and evolving, where you're at with those edges, or if you're feeling out different edges at that time and now, or what's changed or hasn't changed, and yeah, what's up with all of that. Where are you in the path and the trees, or where are you in the forest now? Interesting, you use the path and the trees analogy too, with the irritation and frustration being the wood element. I love that.
I love the image of being on a path, and something I'll talk about, say in a yin practice, of using the poses as paths into us, rather than like as something to be achieved, like a prize. So what I'm learning is that this is a lifetime's work, and that, you know, I love so if we're going to talk about kind of the wood element, and so wood is fed by water, and you look at water, and water is the most yin of yin, and water can dissolve boulders. So these, you know, maybe we could look at, you know, these embedded patterns, you know, these patterns that we learn as young children for a whole variety of different reasons. And it takes a long time to dissolve them. It takes a long time to dissolve them, and then we die. You know, one of the images I love is like layers of an onion, layers of an onion, and there is no end. We just keep inquiry, we keep digging, we keep looking, being curious and learning to be kinder to ourselves, learning that actually it's this moment now. So right now in North London, it's a beautiful day outside, lovely sunshine. I went out for a walk, I hugged a tree, really beautiful big tree, kind of got close up to the tree. It takes a long time. It takes, and I really, you know, what I feel now is that if anyone says, oh, a weekend of Yin Yoga, or a weekend of ayahuasca, or a weekend of humanist psychotherapy, but they probably wouldn't say a weekend, but whatever weekend is being promised, and we'll sort it all out in a weekend, it just doesn't happen. And, you know, one of the things, like being on, I remember, so I'm a great fan of going on meditation retreats, which aren't necessarily all kind of sweetness and light. You know,
oh God, no.
Thank you. Thank you for revealing your humanness. I remember being on a meditation retreat. So I go to this place called Gaia House, which is in Devon, which is a wonderful place. And being on this retreat, and I've been to Gaia House many times, and I was on the retreat and very familiar with the setup. I'm really in the groove, you know how it is. And then on about night 3, I suddenly had this thing that was from a really young age, really disturbing. And it was like, oh my God. And I was like, really, oh my God, like this. And I kind of see, you know, with this links coming back to what we were talking about, boundaries and holding space, you know, for me, kind of having kind of experienced meditation, great way of helping us as teachers hold space.
So that is something that's really up for you right now too.
Yeah.
The boundaries and holding space. Yeah.
Boundaries, holding space, you know, being aware of myself, just trying to keep looking, try to be a bit kinder to myself. You know, like I have a large stripy bear. Everyone should have like that kind of figure, whether it's an imaginative figure or whether it's a real figure. And, you know, sometimes we have these conversations and the voices that he might use to me are much softer and gentler than they were to me 5 years ago.
I love that.
It's a process, Melissa. And we just kind of keep chipping away. That's what I was going to say. I was wondering, where was I going with this conversation? A great test at Gaia House. So you're at Gaia House for a week or however long it is. Wonderful setting. And then you come back, for me, I come back from Gaia House, come back on the train, and I land up at Paddington's train station in West London at rush hour. It's like mayhem.
Yeah. Major culture shock after.
Huge culture shock. And such a great test of practice. Because practice isn't about sitting in a cave.
No.
Practice is about what is going on around us. So an image I've frequently used is like, you're on a retreat, whether it's yoga, meditation, therapy retreat, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Come back into the normal, whatever life is, 2 steps back. The key is you've gone 1 step forward. And slowly, you know, one of my favorite, and I say this quite a bit in my book, you know, shift happens. Shit happens. Shit undoubtedly happens. Life is
Hmm.
difficult. Life can be incredibly challenging. Some really bad things can happen. And shift happens.
Yeah. So I really love the metal season because it asks us to reflect back. And um, I think our culture always asks us to look forward and plan and vision and carry out and move towards those goals. But um, that metal season is so important to look back and say, hey, yeah, you know, there has been a shift either in the last day, the last week, the last month, the last moon cycle, the last season, the last year. It's so valuable to just pause and take that time to acknowledge those shifts. And so I think, you know, there's two things that I want to reflect on and about what you've just said. And one is, and this had me curious all the way through reading your book as well, which is that you have a very active meditation practice and you've trained in meditation a lot. And I don't really know what the question is in this, and yet you teach Yin, right? So I found this for myself too, right? This kind of reconciling between mindfulness practice proper and then Yin practice, and maybe there isn't a distinction, but maybe the question is how you've reconciled both those practices for yourself. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really sure what the question is here, but
You know,
how
something,
those two fit together for you, maybe.
you know, something I'll sometimes use as a description for Yin Yoga is a gateway drug for meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Because you must have come across this, Melissa. Some said, oh, I can't meditate. I
Mm-hmm.
can't meditate. I can't. But you've just been in a yin pose for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, in those 5 minutes, you're planning your summer holiday. You're recollecting a conversation you had 10 years ago. You had a bit of a nap. You thought, what shall I have for dinner? I remember, again, back at our house, and I was halfway through watching The Sopranos. I had a box set of The Sopranos. So if anyone's not watched The Sopranos, my advice is don't. But I wanted to finish it. And I was halfway through. And, you know, that was one of my big distractions on the retreat. It's like,
That's hilarious. I love it.
what's he going to do next? What bad thing is he going to do next? So I see Yin Yoga and meditation as huge crossover.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really major crossover. And for me, what inspires me with Yin is the meditative aspect, is what you might describe as the self-inquiry, this psychotherapeutic angle.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, it's interesting you kind of bring in the elements, because if you talk to me about the elements, or if someone had come along to a Yin class with me 10 years ago, I would not have mentioned them at all. And I've increasingly got into this kind of concept of the water and the wood as the fuel for the fire. And as you said, the culture that we're in is wood,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely wood. It is
Mm-hmm.
about ambition, it's about drive, it's about vision, it's about tomorrow, it's about extracting everything we can out of the earth without any sense of like finite limits.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love with the five elements is this sense of like these aspects, and I kind of see these aspects as like I don't see them as a linear, it's like a disco ball. That's the image that
A
comes to my mind.
disco ball.
Disco ball with innumerable facets. And say if you were to look at the directions, you'd say, oh well, okay, so water is kind of inward, and then wood would be more upward, and then fire would be more outward, and then as you said with metal, there's a kind of more downward sense. And all the directions are equally important.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
all, you know, so if we just spend, it's like if we go like with wood, it's like going to a party like 24/7, 365 days a year, you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
unsustainable.
Yeah.
As much as if we were just in the water, we're not engaging enough with what's going on around us. So
Yeah.
all these aspects kind of balancing each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that you said in the when you were talking about your edge is you spoke about staying for a while, and that, that's really one of the about things taking time. And for me, that's one of the most beloved principles of Yin. And when I knew we were going to talk together, I really have this whole fantasy of us talking about the principles of Yin for a long time. I just adore the principles of Yin. Actually, I have a desire to, when I finish the book that I'm writing on right now, to write an entire book on the principles of Yin, because I think that would just be, oh, oh, you know. But, I'd love for you to say more about this principle of staying for a while. And then I'd love to talk more about the way that you talk about the principles of Yin, because I think you really expand on them. But let's talk about staying for a while for a bit.
So in terms of like staying for a while, I think what's essential is that we're going into a dialogue with ourselves. So to kind of give an example of that, in hero's pose in Virasana, for a long time in my own yoga practice, blocks were considered as like heresy. To even
Really?
think of like using props, you're guaranteed excommunication. Sometimes
Okay.
some people, they think, oh, the Vatican, then they're a bit conservative. But I've come across some yoga styles that make the Vatican look like bastions of liberalism. But then gradually I got more and more into props, and thanks to teachers like Judith Lassiter, who's been another great influence on me. So getting more influence, more helped in my own practice and using props for people coming along to classes. And then in a pose like Virasana, so going for a long time, just sitting with my hips on the ground, then using blocks, then I could feel I could sit, on 2 blocks for a long time. And then a few years ago, having this kind of conversation with myself, am I making it too easy for me personally? Am I making it too easy? And this kind of staying for a while, it kind of gives us that opportunity to have the, when we're in the faster forms of yoga, I think faster yoga is wonderful. I think, I've got a long practice of Ashtanga yoga. Admittedly, as I get older, the Ashtanga gets less. There's a definite graph going on. But I think, it's all about balance, isn't it? If someone says to me, all I'm doing is Yin yoga, then I'd say you need to go and do some weights, or you need to go for a run, balance the energy.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the seasons of our lives and what's happening in our lives right now. I have a lot of students who have chronic fatigue, who are recovering from illness, and then, staying in once they've gotten past the stage of maybe yoga nidra and restorative, the yin can just be so nourishing to rebuild those reserves, right? To build up the well of the water, to feed the roots of the tree so that there is the energy to be able to go back. So I think there are definitely seasons. And I also think, like you're speaking, there's seasons of our lives too, right? Where, practices that once served us, that were a lot more moving, just definitely don't anymore. So yeah, I'm really big on seasons of our lives and different times of our lives too. Yeah. Go on.
It's about making the practice appropriate for where we actually are.
Yes. Choosing the appropriate edge, which is another.
So, nearly always, whether it's a class or a workshop, when I start, we'll start with a little bit of sitting, and I'm saying, like, check in. No kind of grandiose, oh, let's meditate. Just check in. How are you doing right now? And acknowledge that for some people, well, I'm not really feeling anything. For some, because or I'm so tired, I don't have the energy to do that. But it's like, by checking in, that then gives us the information that helps our practice to be helpful for where we actually are, rather than where we, oh, well, I've been doing yoga for 3 years, so therefore ABC. It's like, let go of all of that.
Yeah. I
Really,
think like what you're saying too, I really want to like highlight that, like not feeling something, that feeling of numbness is a feeling in and of itself that needs to be really felt, right?
yes, exactly.
Because that is a kind of strategy, right? that if we can tune into, there's more there.
Mm.
Like it's numbing it's almost like ice, right?
Yes.
And so that, like, as you say, if we stay with that, more will be revealed.
I think one of the challenges of numbness is there can be so much judgment around it.
Mm.
So much like, oh, I should feel something. Oh, I
But
can't
that
feel.
is something.
That is something, but it's not like, it's like,
It's a really edgy something.
but I think for a lot of people, it will be to say, I'm not feeling anything or I'm feeling numbness
Mm.
can be really difficult. And that's actually, what I talk about right at the end of my book is just trying to be gentle and soft with ourselves and just keep looking.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep looking. So, okay, I'm feeling numbness. Oh, I'm feeling, a warmth in my heart. Oh, I'm inhaling, or I'm feeling a stretch in the back of my thigh.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep looking. Just
Yeah.
keep looking.
Yeah. And I love how you say it's by staying for a while that we are able to feel, to sense, and to discover.
Going layer,
Mm-hmm.
layer. So in like say a vinyasa class, we're just there for like 20 seconds maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like we're able to distract our mind with more movement.
Yes, which is appropriate at times. Like I loved when you sent me one of your classes, and I love what ventral vagus research has brought to this too, and trauma informed yoga. Like when we're activated, I'm the most appropriate thing for me is not necessarily yin, because it's maybe too much space for those activated emotions, that highly activated mind to just like a monkey that's going all over the place. It's just there's not enough boundary. There's too much free reign. And so I loved in that class that you sent me that I did, that you had the dance out for, and it was a long dance party. It was like 5 minutes, which is a long time to move that energy through your body before you sit down. It's
Yes.
like getting the wiggles out when you're in kindergarten, right?
What
So
does
let's attend to them.
what does an animal do when they've just had a shock?
Exactly.
They kind of literally they shake it off. But I describe the dancing as a pandemic positive because say if someone had said to me, a year and a bit ago, do you play music in classes? I'd be like, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 20th century. No, no music,
Yeah.
no music in classes. And then thanks to the pandemic, in a lot of the classes I'm teaching, we'll do like some classic disco song and just kind of shake it around. And
Yeah.
I think, dancing movement is so healthy for our hearts. It's so important to so exactly get the balance of the staying for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Let's kind of and be free.
Yeah. Like let's prepare our minds and our bodies, our emotional bodies, our energetic bodies, so that we've created the space and the
Mm,
capacity to be able to stay for a while.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I loved how you did that. I
Oh,
loved it so much. Um, let's talk more about the principles of yin, and you have a whole chapter on this in your book, starting on page 35. And when I learned yin yoga, we learned 4 principles of yin, which for me were find appropriate edge. I think I actually only learned 3, but I've expanded them to 4. Yeah, whatever. They were find an appropriate edge, soften, be still, and stay for a while. And in your book, you have lots, so many. And I have to say, I mean, this chapter on the principles and practicalities really helped me deepen my understandings of of the principles of yin. So I would just love for you to wax poetic on them for me. I love what you have to say about them and how you expanded them and all of that. Yeah.
so one of the things I do is I change them around. And that's, for me as a teacher, is like trying to consider, what am I doing? How can I express this differently? So some days I might, so recently I've been emphasizing face, shoulders, and breath. So, forget about the angle of your head, like it's saying butterfly, forget about, how close or how far away your head is from your heels. How's your face? Because often, and I know this is definitely true for me, we're in a pose and we're grinding our teeth.
Yeah, yeah.
My one
Yeah.
is that kind of, that one in
I do the jaw.
jaw.
Yeah.
It's like, actually keeping the face soft, much more important than how flexible we might be around our hips. And
Totally.
then maintaining a pattern of breathing. So a pattern I'll use a lot is that it's a steady breath, and I'll talk sometimes about coherent breathing, where it's like evening, the breath is up 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. But the breath is like showing us what is possible, because if we're really pushing in a pose, if we're being too yang in the yin, which is so common. I have a list of, I call it my first yin experience. It's like my first kiss, my first yin experience. And people have sent me some amazing ones. I remember someone saying her first yin experience was it her brain was whining, her muscles were screaming, and she wept afterwards. I'm like, wow, that sounds a really successful yoga class. But so if we can be aware of our breathing, so our breathing guides us, and then what's happening with the shoulders. So keep, trying to keep it, because again, we can be almost like intellectually thinking, oh, I'm staying soft in the pose, I'm not striving, and then I'm feeling my shoulder, oh my God, my shoulders have come into my ears. So I will use different formulas. I'll emphasize a lot about kindness. I'll talk about the true test for a yoga class is that we can walk away afterwards. I remember being on a retreat.
What do you mean by that?
Well, let me with Sarah Powers in Thailand back in the late 2000s, and we were doing these kind of 4 bends in the afternoon. Thailand is hot, makes you more flexible, and I was like, wow, like I am so bendy. Wow, I'm so bendy. And then the next morning, the wow went from, in less than 24 hours, wow to ow. It was like, oh my God, what have I done to my hamstrings? So fortunately, it dissipated reasonably quickly. But it's like, particularly for people who've done a lot of yoga and are unfamiliar with yin yoga, you must err on the side of caution. Because this is different. This is staying in the poses. So if you are that yang in the yin, you might wake up the next morning thinking, oh my God. Or at the end of the class, you might be like, oh my God, what have I just done? I'm talking from personal experience, Melissa, that back in my Ashtanga days, there were on occasion, I staggered away from the studio. My knee was so sore. It's like, but I was striving, I was pushing, because Padmasana was a prize. And if I get Padmasana, then I'm going to be enlightened.
So you actually remind me now of when I lived in Toronto. I used to go to Esther Meyer's yoga studio. Are you familiar with Esther Meyer's? Yeah. And the studio was on the 2nd floor. And we used to do these like hour-long, 2-hour advanced classes there. And they would be like all hips or all legs or something like that, right? And then, where I'm going with this, at the end of the class, you had to walk down those stairs, right? So now I'm getting what you're saying about being able to walk away from the class, because, so there's a whole different mindset in yoga though, 15, 20 years ago, which brought a lot of that messaging of striving to get the perfect pose, right? That I think came from that tradition of, and not to blame Iyengar, but it came from that tradition of Iyengar where there was a proper alignment, proper form, and we were trying to make a pose look a certain way, right? which is different from Yin. I feel like we're going off now, but yeah. So then you were, yeah. So I get what you're saying about, because afterwards it would always be like, oh my gosh, is my leg going to meet me on that next stair, right? Or is it going to actually like fall out of my joint now? Yeah.
You've got to get down those stairs, Melissa.
Yeah, it was questionable some days.
Yeah. So, that's a really good test of our practice, isn't it? But I think those reasons they came from lots of different sources. But yeah, to me, one of the keys, and again, this comes back to, we could talk about the kind of the principles of Yin, is about sustainability. So I'm about to be 58. I want to be practicing yoga when I'm 68, when I'm 78. It'll be different, touching on what you were saying earlier. But does a practice sustain me? Is what I'm doing in my life? There's a friend of mine, and she talks about, what drains us and what sustains us. Such a good question. And it's like, and of course, I eat ice cream. I go on Facebook. I do things. I'm like, why did I do that? But it's like, going back to the tree hugging. I find tree hugging very sustaining. Going for a daily walk. For me, that's really important for my emotional and physical health. The whole idea of moving my body in as many different directions as possible. So this, I think, Katie Bowman, maybe you've come across her. She's American. Movement Matters. And this is the kind of just move your body in as many different directions as possible. So part of my practice, I do maybe like once, twice a week, perhaps 20 minutes, half an hour of like kind of Qigong style movements.
Love Qigong.
Just all these. So it's not, I've just picked it up along the way. Something I've been doing, another pandemic positive, is each morning, whether it's been snow, whether it's been sunshine, I have a meditation path in the back garden with bark on it. So I've, right from the start of the pandemic, each morning, barefoot, walking the meditation path. It's a great way to start the day. Very invigorating, these kind of bits of bark on the soles of my feet, plus sometimes snow, ice, rain. Wonderful way to start the day. I don't know what the neighbors think.
Yeah, I can't worry too much about that. So, I'm curious because, as we practice, we change and our needs change. And I'm curious, what drew you into Yin? Maybe that would have been a better place to start, but we kind of dove right in. What drew you to Yin, and now what keeps you interested in Yin? Like you're talking about what sustains you now. So yeah, what was the initial spark that got lit, and what is sustaining that's the fire, the embers of the fire?
I kind of feel in some ways I fell into it by accident. And I was just at a weekend for meditators within the kind of Buddhist practice, and part of the weekend were yoga classes. And this was up at the Manchester Buddhist Centre. And there was a woman there who's now called Pama Darshini, and she taught a Yin class. And this is 20 years ago, actually. And she had just come back from the US. She'd met Sarah on the West Coast, studied with Sarah. She brings back this practice. And by nature, I'm highly yang. I need Yin. I'm the kind of the guy standing in the supermarket checkout. Come on, hurry up. Can't you see I'm in a rush? Hurry up. So I need Yin. And going to that first Yin class, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So up until then, all I'd done were kind of varieties of Ashtanga yoga, a bit of Iyengar yoga, but pretty much the kind of the fast, the alignment orientated yoga. And then it just started from there. And then next summer, 2002, Sarah came to London and I studied with her. So I was meeting Sarah and Ty. And it's just kind of those seeds were starting to be planted. I was like, this is it. So it wasn't that it was supplanting my Ashtanga practice. I was seeing it as working with the Ashtanga practice. And on a physical level, what I found for myself was this was a way of accessing my body in a different way than, say, Ashtanga was.
Mm-hmm.
In terms, I've always naturally been fairly strong, being quite energetic, the yang, the
Mm-hmm.
wood, but not so much flexible in my body. And what I was finding through the staying for a while, they're getting more flexible. And then as a consequence of becoming more flexible, say my hips, that's a way of protecting my knees. Is that whole
Mm-hmm.
thing of like, when we're trying to do like a half lotus pose, and we're restriction in our hips, and so we just push into our knees. So by opening our hips, this can be a way of actually defending, supporting our knees. So what's kept me going? I don't know, there's almost like a passion for yin, and kind of what I do. Like I was just doing a practice before this interview, and I sometimes do, I call it short yin, where I just do poses for 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of sometimes do a little bit of almost like a mashup. I might do like, I've quite got into using weights, like sandbags.
Mm-hmm.
I'll sit there and hold a sandbag over my head for like 5 minutes, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't particularly yin, but I'll be sitting in, say, Varasana or sitting on my heels. It's just, I love practicing. I love moving my body. One of the things I love with yin is I feel there are many corridors.
Mm-hmm.
There are many, I feel, it's something I'll say very clearly on trainings, that you do not need to know where any of the meridians are to practice or to teach in yoga.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even need to know much about anatomy. It doesn't really matter. What you need is your spark, your enthusiasm, your passion for the practice. And, I've done trainings with teachers I highly respect and never heard a poem from them. But you come along to a class with me or workshop with me, and it's pretty much guaranteed I'll say a poem or say something, that kind of writing that's really inspired me. So I don't think one's better than the other. It's about lots of different directions. And for myself, as I said before, 10 years ago, the 5 elements was like complete foreign language. I had no idea about it. And these days, I'm really quite inspired by it.
Yeah, I think it speaks to for me, it speaks to the love of metaphor, which is also part of poetry, which is a very yin aspect, right? Poetry doesn't seek to be understood, it seeks to be felt in your emotional body and sensed, and you just want to feel the feelings of it. And I always read poetry in my classes. My teacher always read poetry in her classes, and my students love it. A lot of it is, it's almost a bit of, first and foremost, it tends to be a healing journey for them in that they don't have to analyze poems anymore like they did in school. So it drops the analytical mind, because I teach them how to just be with the felt sensation of the poem and what it brings to their feeling body, right? And yeah, and just to enjoy the sounds of the words, not worry about what it means. So I think poetry is so yin, and the 5 elements is just built on metaphor. So of course it makes total sense. It makes total sense.
One of my favorite episodes of Star Trek. Are you into Star Trek, Melissa?
I'm not a Trekkie, but go for it. Knock yourself out. I want you to love what you love.
In the
Go
next
for your glimmer.
they meet another civilization and they only talk in metaphors.
Oh.
And they don't understand. And it's like, it's about to like become a huge battle. And then someone clicks. All they talk, their language is all metaphor. And then they're like, oh, okay, we can communicate now.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I just have you've just been so generous with your time. I have a couple more questions, and then I'm gonna let you finish your evening. I would love to know, because Yin's been around for a while now, and as we've talked about different seasons and of our lives, and I'd love to know what's captivating you most about teaching Yin right now. And you talked it a little bit in this interview too about sustaining our interests, and of course the way we taught at the beginning evolves and changes. So yeah, what's captivating you most about teaching Yin right now?
Pretty much every time I teach, I'll change the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking at like, okay, why am I doing this? And then what I realize is I'm not doing some postures because it's in the online format, because I'm a big fan of things like sandbags. And so
Mm-hmm.
obviously I can't fly down the Zoom camera and put a sandbag on someone. I just think it's like looking at what I'm doing. Oh, let's do it this way. Going to other people's classes, getting inspiration from other
Mm-hmm.
people. So, oh, that's a good idea. I'd not thought of doing it that way.
Yeah, I love that. I love, when I first did my very first training, one of the best pieces of advice, I'm thinking about something that I'm doing in my practice right now, which is like a less is more thing. So I'll take one pose and I'll repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So 5 minutes and a knee down twist, for example, side to side with a rebound in between, side to side, side to side, side to side. So 4 times, and then it's on each side, and then it's like a 60-minute class, right? And the depth and the layers, and you can kind of go deeper and it comes out a bit because the edge changes over that time. And so there's this kind of, I see this teaching in terms of sequencing on this continuum of like simplicity to on the other end of a caution I received when I first started teaching of don't feel the need to entertain your students. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I love going to other people's classes and getting ideas. And then I know I have that kind of shadow side of that people pleasing part of myself, right? Of wanting to give them a new and exciting class or a new and exciting experience or a new and exciting variation of a pose. And yeah, I know in my own practice, some of the most interesting experiences are just stripping it like right down, as I said, to one pose. So yeah.
That reminds me of this feedback I got from a friend of mine who's been teaching a long time. And she came along to a class, this is quite a while ago. And at the end of the class, she said, Norman, you don't have to be such an entertainer. And I was like, those were the very words she used, Melissa. And I was like pulling the knife out. I was like, "Oh." But I'm not a stand-up comedian. And I was kind of getting caught almost in the trap of like, it was only a good class if there were 6 laughs. It's absurd. And that links neatly back to this whole idea of feedback and support and getting advice from other people.
Yeah.
That we do definitely get stuck in patterns of doing things. And what you were saying, sometimes it's almost, I must make it more complicated, or I must bring in new poses. But actually, sometimes some people just want to come along and just do a few poses and really practice that less is more.
Yeah. And then my last question for you, and I think maybe we've already touched on it, so we might be circling back around, but what frustrates you most right now about teaching Yin? What's the biggest edge right now? I think I might know the answer to this already.
Well, I'm not sure if frustration is the right word. I want to be back teaching in person.
I knew that was going to be the answer. Yeah. Yeah.
But also, I do think Zoom classes are here to stay. I think live classes on Zoom are here to stay. But I want to be back in a room with people. Having said that, I remember reading this piece recently where it said, there is light in the tunnel, but the tunnel is a lot longer than we think it is. So, myself and my partner, we were thinking, oh, by May, we'll be back teaching in person. That's not going to happen. So now, maybe end of August, we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want, but do you know what just comes up then? I wrote about this maybe a month or 2 ago of, teaching yoga, I think is a great privilege. And as yoga teachers, it's like we're offering seeds to people. And sometimes we don't realize what influence we might have on people's lives. And to kind of balance both taking that seriously and also taking that lightly. It's not, I'm saying don't get all serious about this, but also do be serious about this and do be serious about our practice. And as teachers, for me, a priority is our practice. And to keep the, to keep the inquiry, to keep looking and not be, and one of the things, I mentioned Judith and Sarah, and also, of course, Paul Grilly and Richard Freeman. And something I love about those teachers is I feel they're evolving. They're not stuck in their script. They're not stuck in their practice. They keep looking, and maybe that's no longer working. I'm going to kick it out. Rather than being, I've made all this investment in a practice, in a style, in a school, in a building, so I must, I'm building up my empire. I must keep my empire going. It's like, keep looking.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, I adore the 5 elements so much, but I think that's where they come in so beautifully, right? Because when we travel through the seasons, we can have that sink into that willingness to let go and go through the death seasons too. And then there is that rebirth where new things will come in. And I think that is really important, as you say, as teachers. And I do think this has been a really challenging time to be only online. I mean, I am an online teacher, but I have never said that we should only be teaching online. I've always said that, it is a complement to teaching, to having in-person teaching experiences. I used to go to in-person classes. I think there is something that happens that is different in the in-person space that doesn't happen in the online space. And I think that the online space offers us something that the in-person space can't offer us, right? There's just the accessibility is amazing, right? Like that you and I can talk right now would not be happening if it was not for this, right? And the fact that I can take classes with you, it's just not going to be as accessible for me if I need to come and practice with you in person, right? It would involve a lot of expenses and time and reorganizing of schedules and things. So I think there's a huge, huge benefit to online practicing, but I think that we're human beings, we're mammals, and we need that social connection that we're not getting. So yeah, I really do hope and pray that we get that back soon.
We need a herd to survive and thrive.
Yeah. And not to say that we're not getting some of that in the online space, but it's really different in person too.
And, to be honest, Melissa, I'm stunned by how well this has worked. People would say to me pre-pandemic, will you teach online? Will you run trainings online? I was like, absolutely not. It's literally, I don't believe in it. I was like, talk about 20th century. I was like, I don't believe in it. And March last year, no choice. And, my partner and I went straight online, and it's worked incredibly well. And, with trainings, with courses, people have come along and they said, they feel, there is the container, even though we're all like little rectangles on the screen, there is a container. So yeah, I'll eat my words.
I love that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we close out? Definitely share your website, maybe any upcoming training. Is there just anything else that you had hoped to share that I didn't ask you about?
I don't think so. I have a monthly newsletter, so you can read my thoughts on tree hugging and Yoga Land and world events and that. But yeah, I'm really happy to connect with you, Melissa.
Me too. Thank you so much. So your website is yogawithnorman.co.uk, and that's where people can find about your upcoming trainings. And you do retreats too, or
yes, not at the moment.
Not right now, but
it will definitely happen. And yeah, regular retreats. And my partner's a meditation teacher, so we work together on the retreats.
I love it. So if we get on your email, then we'll know about that. And yeah, you do, for those of you who like the way Norman writes and like to be immersed in that, you do share that in your newsletter as well. So that's great. Thank you so much, Norman. It was just such a pleasure to get to know you and to be connected with you in this way today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Okay.